Welcome to Season 1 of the PMO Community Podcast series. I'm Aina Live, your guide on this engaging exploration into the world of PMO leadership, highlighted by our unique book writing challenge. This season promises a series of enriching interviews with our distinguished book co-authors. Today, I am thrilled to converse with Christoph Hirnle, an internationally recognized expert in organizational effectiveness, PMO, and project portfolio management. Christoph's academic journey spans computer science, management, and sociology, culminating in a PhD in organizational economics from the University of Munich. His belief that business effectiveness and employee well-being are deeply interconnected has shaped his innovative approach to management. As managing director at Meisterplan, Christoph has pioneered Lean PPM and decision-making framework that empowers organizations worldwide to make adaptive portfolio and resource decisions. His extensive expertise includes leading initiatives in strategy development, agile transformation, and post-merger integration. Today, we will dive into several thought-provoking topics and challenges, such as transition from theory to practice, where Christoph will share concrete examples of a PMO that transformed in a strategic approach and the impact it had on the organization. Executive recognition, discussing specific results that have effectively elevated the PMO status within organizations. Strategic versus operational focus, how PMOs can balance efficiency with effectiveness without sacrificing long-term strategic goals. Overcoming obstacles, strategies to overcome common challenges to effective strategy execution. Adaptive planning, practical steps PMOs can take to ensure their strategic plans remain flexible and responsive to change. Resource alignment, delving into effective management of resource alignment under constraints. Role of middle management, leveraging middle management to bridge the strategy to execution gap. Lean PPM framework, explaining how this framework helps navigate portfolio-level decision-making and strategy execution. Catalyzing change, first steps a PMO should take to transform into strategy execution catalyst and common pitfalls to avoid. Future of PMOs, Christoph's vision on how the role of PMOs will evolve over the next 5 to 10 years, especially with new technologies and methodologies. Stay tuned as Christoph shares his profound insights and recommendations for navigating the complexities of modern project management. Don't miss out on our upcoming episodes. Follow us on social media such as LinkedIn, YouTube, Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts to stay updated. Hello, Christoph.
Hey, Aina.
How's it going?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I love the book project. I love this podcast. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for joining me, as you just mentioned, for the book writing challenge, which is related to the topic of the evolution of the PMO, the rise of the chief project officer. And first of all, why did you decide to contribute your time and knowledge to this project?
I like the theme of a chief project officer, but I think that PMOs should focus on what PMOs can achieve and not aspire to getting to an executive position as this is the destination of PMOs. No, a PMO should be a PMO. PMOs are wonderfully suited for the unique challenges they can solve as problem solvers in organizations. And so I wanted to contribute that I feel being a PMO is wonderful and essential and really, really important. And in the discussion around the chief project officer, we should not forget that this is about project folks and PMO folks, and perhaps someone in the executive suite can support, but that might not be essential, my perspective.
Thank you very much again for your time and effort. And let's speak about transition from theory to practice. So you discussed in your chapter the theoretical underpinnings of the PMO as a strategy execution catalyst. But can you share a concrete example where a PMO transformed its strategic approach and the impact it had on the organization?
So now we work with organizations around the world, so I see this every day, large, small, any industry, but I want to pick a smaller one. Perhaps it's a little more relatable. And before I do that, a really important aspect is there needs to be a window of opportunity for change when you can make that switch. And that is typical. A new boss, there's a reorg, there's a crisis, perhaps. Yeah. Or you're setting up the PMO for the first time. So there needs to be this window of opportunity. Why? Because this is when you can scope again what your PMO is supposed to be doing for your stakeholders. Okay, so now the example. And this is a retail group. They they sell wine, 15 different brands. They're the largest reseller here in Europe. And there was they have shared corporate functions, shared technology, shared logistics, and so on. So think of it as 15 different brands, stationary, online, mail order, and they have one common basis for doing all their business. Now, in the past, they were focusing on delivering projects in whatever project management or agile methodology, and they felt, okay, let's be excellent in that, and everybody will be happy. And unfortunately, they were not. All the brand leads hated the PMO. The project managers, they were totally overburdened. They were burnt out. People were leaving the company. It was just, it was such a strain on everyone. Everybody unhappy. Now, a new boss came in for the technology piece in the middle and say what he believes is required is to better align what the activities are that happen in the center with what the total overall goal is of the organization. And by making it transparent and having a transparent process with all the unit heads or brand leaders, getting into a flow of continuous value delivery that is directed at the overall company, not an individual brand, whoever shouts the loudest. So that was fantastic. And I remember still speaking to a project manager, and he told me that now that they run this new process, he's in flow and he was about to leave the company before that. And so that was just wonderful from a personal perspective.
Oh, such a happy ending.
Yes, it was wonderful.
Initially.
He doesn't drink wine, though. He's a beer drinker.
And let's focus on strategy and operations. So let's talk about efficiency and effectiveness, which is critical in project management. So how can PMOs maintain a balance between these two, ensuring that they don't sacrifice long-term strategic goals from short-term operational efficiency?
From my perspective, as a PMO, you do not get to choose. Your stakeholders will let you know whether they want you to be more efficient or more effective. So if your stakeholders believe that efficient project execution is the most important thing, or they believe that projects that increase organizational efficiency are most important, or whether they believe that the organization should focus on growth topics or effectiveness, that is not for you as a PMO to decide. I think it is up to your stakeholders, essentially your boss typically, or your bosses, will determine what is the balance between the efficiency in project execution, projects that have an efficiency focus, and projects that have an effectiveness focus. So that's something that you have to work out. I think that's the close relationship that you need to maintain with your stakeholders, and they will inform you. But maybe they're not even aware, but I guess that's what you can help them with.
Yeah, totally agree. Sometimes project managers think that they need to decide almost everything on the project, but as project managers, we actually don't decide almost anything. We just collaborate with our stakeholders, and then they provide the direction from them. And the challenge is to manage different directions from different stakeholders, but not decide on your own. And this leads to my next question, which is resource alignment. So again, aligning the resources is pivotal in project. And in my memory, there are many projects which failed, unfortunately, when resources weren't aligned properly. So, Christoph, could you delve into how PMOs can effectively manage this alignment, and particularly when resources are limited or stretched across multiple projects?
I think this is absolutely essential. From my perspective, there is no portfolio management without resource or capacity management. There is no capacity resource management without portfolio management. Why? Because this is the same one and the same thing. Whenever you manage anything at all, you do one thing. You call out what is a priority and you allocate resources to that priority. In our knowledge worker world, this is our time. So what you have committed your time to, what you have allocated your time to, de facto, is what you have prioritized. Prioritization and resource allocation must be one and the same thing. So as PMOs, I think PMOs have a unique capability and a unique position looking at sort of what is the organization working on, who is committing time to what part of our value streams or of our goals. Yeah. That's where PMOs can help management make better decisions on making those calls, because resources are always limited and there's always too many projects, but it's too many projects for the people you have. There is no absolute too many projects. It is always in sync. Does that make sense?
Of course it does. And I am very much curious about the term PPMTM framework, which you mentioned in your article. Could you explain to us, to the audience, what's the Lean PPMTM framework in more details?
Yes. So how did that come about? I have to say that I think it was something like 10 years ago. And I did in my previous career, I worked in project portfolio management and the like product management organizations, but I never knew I did product portfolio management. I just managed many projects, right?
Yeah.
And what I found was when we work with our customers that managing a portfolio is something that is very different to managing a project or many projects. It is about composing your portfolio towards an organization's goals and making sure impediments, I know that's an agile term, but impediments from execution are removed during execution so you can deliver as fast as possible. And one of the elements of that most important impediment is resource conflicts. So if you don't have resources working on something, you don't make progress. So that you could go the agile route and say we do agile teams, but then you have the dependencies between the teams. So there's always an element around the resources. So now we clearly need a dynamic process to make those decisions on what is a priority and when do we allocate resources to it. And that's what we try to do. Take a typical process for portfolio management. So there's a strategy development thing, and then you collect options to work on. What are the projects that you can do? What are the initiatives? And then you make the decision, and then you execute. Yes? No. It all happens at the same time. Strategy and goal setting is a constant refinement. There's always new things that come in. There's always new ideas, better ways to run your business, more changes that you can apply. There's always things that are already underway and that perhaps are worth investing more into. So there's a constant decision-making need for what are the things that we should be working on and who do we assign. And that's very agile in a way, I think. And the principles we base this on are some of the lean principles that we find, such as, of course, value, but then flow and pull, and Jidoka, that you're interested in more particularly.
Yeah, I was just so pleased that you brought up the agile term as agilist again. I'm very pleased when the guests are talking about agile while we are talking about PMO questions. So that was very heart melting for me. And yes, the idea is pretty much clear. And especially when you have the project management mindset, when you do like one stage at a time, but actually, no, you do all of the stages together because changes, as you just mentioned, happen all the time. And we need to be reactive and not just reactive. We need to be proactive in these changes. So totally makes sense. And I would have more questions about that, but I feel like we can have a separate podcast talking about the PMTM framework. I just want to focus today on the change and future, because that was the topic of the book and your chapter. So I will pivot to the next question, which is related to catalyzing the change. And Christoph, what are the first steps a PMO should take to begin transforming into a strategy execution catalyst? And are there any common pitfalls they should avoid?
I'm quoting Laura Bernard here. So for some of the audience, PMO Strategies founder, Laura Bernard, fantastic quote from her. Nobody ever got promoted for adding another template. This is about what problems as a PMO, what problems do we solve for our main stakeholders? And even if that's not a strategic thing, go ask your boss, what are her goals? What are her objectives? What is important to her? Many companies, unfortunately, don't have a strategy or don't have a codified strategy. So really, you as a PMO are working to support the goal of the organization, and you are part of an organization. Sometimes you cut across, but who's your main stakeholder and what are her goals? Or if you have a number, what are their goals? And that's the very, very first thing before you do a thing. And there's a list of 10, 20, 50 initiatives that you can do in optimizing agile delivery methods or whatnot. But what is your change roadmap? What is your first step? And how does that first step provide a clear visibility to the rest of the organization that this makes sense? Let me give you an example. Worked with a chemicals conglomerate earlier last year, and they had 4 different companies with one holding structure above it. And they introduced a PMO to govern of IT and business transformation themes across those 4. Now, what was the first goal of that newly formed PMO? It was an acceptance of the process, of the transparent decision-making process by the unit heads. So the first thing that was important is, how can we establish an organizational project delivery method that is accepted in the organization? So that was their first KPI. Do the unit heads feel, quote unquote, feel treated fairly? Just crazy, huh? Yeah. So that's what I mean. Don't go into it. I know that these 10 things need to be done, delivery methods, optimizing quality. No, think about the organization and your capabilities as an organization to drive your business through projects, and who do you need to be on board? And what are their needs? And start with that and put that on a roadmap. So that's sort of what would be my hint.
Thank you very much. Yes, very simple. Like, start from basics. Just put the roadmap and
it's the same thing. Yes. Yep.
No silver bullets, which everybody keeps looking. Just go to basics. That's my advice as a coach. But unfortunately, you cannot sell simple advices. So that. My final question for you, Christoph, is what do you see the future of it? So how do you see the PMO evolving in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years, and the role of the project manager or chief project officer? So what changes can you anticipate?
At times where most of the organization worked in line work and a little bit of time was committed to projects, it was okay, sort of, still to think about projects as one thing. But today, as maybe more than half, and with AI, even more, way more than half of the workforce in an organization will work and change through things like projects or agile delivery methods, Scrum, whatnot. It is absolutely vital to understand that an organizational has to have the capability to make decisions on how does this business work if we don't run it, but if we change it constantly. And a PMO is the problem solver and the coordinator and the aligning element that aligns sort of the value creating core and the strategy in a new world. And how that will be called, value management office, portfolio management office, agile, doesn't matter. It is a new form of middle management role. I'm so excited that there's a big community to support people in this role because it's new. And I think it is really, really important. So I'm really looking forward to the next 5 to 10 years for PMOs.
Me too. I'm looking forward to see how it's going to change and also what new technologies will bring to the table and disrupt completely what we are planning and thinking about nowadays. So thank you. Thank you very much, Christoph, for your time and for sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you, everyone who's been listening us until the end. And Christoph, hope to see you in our future podcast. And the rest of you, see you in our next episode. Stay tuned.
Thank you for tuning in to the PMO Community Podcast for this enlightening discussion with Christoph Hirnle. A special thanks to our volunteers at the PMO Community Podcast for making this episode possible. Stay tuned for more captivating insights and interviews in our upcoming episodes. Don't forget to follow us on social media such as YouTube, LinkedIn, Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts to stay updated. If you find this episode valuable, please remember to like and share it. Feel free to reach out to me, Aina Live, on LinkedIn with any questions or requests. And for all the latest updates, make sure to follow us on our social media.